So, when you think of ancient Egypt, what pops into your head? Pyramids, right? Pharaohs, the Sphinx, all that classic stuff. But what if I told you there was this unsung hero, something just as crucial to building that incredible civilization? I'm talking about the sailing ship.
Yeah, I know. That sounds like a pretty big claim, right? But seriously, it's true. The whole ability to move these massive stone blocks, to feed an entire kingdom, and to unite a sprawling empire, that didn't just come down to pure manpower. Nope. It all depended on mastering the wind and the water. Okay, so let's dive right in. We're going to explore how these sailing ships weren't just, a nice to have for the Egyptians. They were the absolute bedrock, the essential technological foundation for their economy, their political unity, and even their whole culture. And to really get why these ships were so critical, you have to understand Egypt's geography first. Because for the ancient Egyptians, the river wasn't just important, it was literally everything. Just picture Egypt in your mind's eye for a second. It's not some vast, wide-open country. It's basically this long, skinny, fertile valley, like a green ribbon of life. And it's totally squeezed on both sides by this harsh, unforgiving desert. And that geography, it posed a huge challenge. I mean, how on earth do you connect and control a kingdom that's stretched out for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers? Trying to travel by land, it was just brutal. I mean, think about it. No modern roads. Dragging heavy stuff through sand was unbelievably slow and inefficient. But the Nile? Oh, the Nile was a ready-made superhighway, just flowing right through the heart of the kingdom. Okay, and this is where the story gets really, really brilliant. See, the Nile wasn't just any river. It offered this unique and incredibly powerful natural advantage that almost no other civilization in history has ever had. It was a perfect two-way transport system basically handed to them by nature itself. Okay, so here's the absolute key to everything. The river's current flows in one direction, north, out to the Mediterranean Sea. Simple enough. But, and this is the magic part, the wind, the prevailing wind, blows in the exact opposite direction, south, up the river. So you've got these two powerful, natural forces moving in perfect opposition to each other. It's amazing. So how did the Egyptians use this? It was genius in its simplicity. If you wanted to go north, you just lowered your sails and let the river's current do all the work, just drift along. But what if you needed to go south against the current? Well, you just hoisted a sail, caught that reliable northerly wind, and it would push you right up the river. It was an unbelievably elegant and efficient system. But of course, this amazing natural gift was just raw potential, right? To really unlock its power, the Egyptians needed the right piece of tech. They needed a way to catch that southerly wind. They needed the sailing ship. So in the early days, Egyptian boats were pretty simple, just rafts made from tying papyrus reeds together. Good for, popping down to the next village. Over time, they got better, developing more sophisticated wooden boats. But the real game changer, the leap forward that changed everything, that was the mast and the sail. This single innovation was the key that turned the Nile from just a useful river into the actual engine of a civilization. And boom, suddenly you don't need these huge teams of guys exhausting themselves rowing. You can now carry much, much heavier cargo, like, giant blocks of stone for a pyramid. Long-distance travel became practical, not some punishing ordeal. It even helped them get around their own resource problems, letting them import the huge timbers they needed for shipbuilding from places way off like Lebanon. So, with this powerful new tech in their hands, the Egyptians could now do things on a scale that was just unimaginable before. The sailing ship became the literal backbone of pretty much every major aspect of their society. I mean, just think about the big stuff, their monumental construction projects. Those massive blocks for the pyramids and temples weren't dragged across the desert for miles and miles. No way. They were floated down the Nile from quarries hundreds of kilometers away. Or what about the economy? It basically ran on a huge state-controlled grain system, and ships were the only way to collect taxes, which was grain, move it all to central storehouses, and then ship it back out to feed soldiers, officials, and all those workers building the pyramids. And this is huge for politics, too. A pharaoh sitting in the capital could issue a decree, and a ship, just sailing with the wind or the current, could carry that message hundreds of kilometers in a really short amount of time. Tax collectors, soldiers, architects, everybody moved along the Nile. It allowed the central government to project its authority into every single corner of the kingdom. The ships were basically the circulatory system of the entire Egyptian state. Boats became so central to their whole existence that they got woven into their deepest beliefs. They weren't just tools, they were these incredibly powerful symbols. Think about it. Their most important god, the sun god Ra, didn't ride some chariot across the sky. He sailed in a celestial boat. That's just how fundamental the idea of traveling on the river was to the way they saw the universe. So it really makes you wonder, right? What would Egypt have been without its boats? Well, for one thing, it probably would have just been a collection of isolated towns along a river, not a unified kingdom. Trade would have been painfully slow, huge construction projects would have been nearly impossible, and the central government, it would have really struggled to project any real power. The Nile would have been as much of a barrier as it was a gift.
So when you step back and look at the big picture, this is really a story about the powerful creative relationship between a people, their environment, and their technology. It's about how human ingenuity can take a geographical feature and transform it into the very foundation of a civilization.
And that right there is the real genius of it. The Egyptians showed this kind of environmental intelligence. They really looked at the natural forces around them, the current flowing one way, the wind blowing the other. And instead of trying to fight against them, they developed technology that worked in perfect harmony with those forces. You see, the Nile gave Egypt an incredible opportunity. But it was the humble sailing ship that allowed the Egyptians to grab that opportunity with both hands. It's what let them transform a simple fact of geography into one of the most enduring and absolutely remarkable civilizations in all of human history.